First contact with the drifting Titan. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting the edge of Coalition territory had been quiet for 73 cycles. Captain Vexlar of the Caltherian species sat in his command chair, his 4 eyes scanning the vast emptiness of space through the observation windows. His crew aboard the research vessel Quantum Dawn had been conducting routine surveys of the outer rim, mapping stellar phenomena and cataloging cosmic radiation patterns. Nothing prepared them for what their sensors detected that morning. The alarm systems erupted across the bridge with a sound that made everyone freeze. Senior Sensor Operator Thelmos, a methodical Zenthari with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns, stared at her display with all 3 of her optical organs wide in disbelief. She ran the scan sequence 4 times before she trusted her instruments enough to speak. "Captain, we have an object at coordinates 749 Mark 32. Distance is approximately 60,000 kilometers and closing on our position." Her voice carried the tremor of uncertainty that came from witnessing something that defied logic. Vexlar rose from his seat, his tall frame moving with the grace that his species was known for. Classification. Thelmos hesitated, her fingers dancing across her console as she attempted to make sense of the data flooding her screens. "Unknown, sir. The mass readings suggest a vessel, but the size is beyond anything in our database. It's approximately 4 kilometers in length and appears to be drifting without power." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. 4 kilometers. The largest Coalition warship ever constructed measured barely 1 kilometer. Whatever this object was, it represented technology far beyond their understanding. "Put it on screen," Vexlar commanded, settling back into his chair and gripping the armrests with anticipation. The main view screen flickered to life, and what appeared made several crew members gasp audibly. The vessel that materialized before them looked like something born from nightmares rather than any rational design philosophy. Its hull was dark, almost black, with angular surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive weapon emplacements bristled along its surface, and even in its dormant state, the ship radiated an aura of menace that was impossible to ignore. But what truly caught everyone's attention was the damage. The hull showed evidence of combat so intense that by all logical assessment, the vessel should have been destroyed. Enormous gouges ran the length of the ship where energy weapons had carved through armor plating. Entire sections looked as though they had been exposed to temperatures capable of melting titanium. Debris floated around the hull, frozen remnants of what had once been internal compartments now exposed to the void. "How is that thing still in one piece?" whispered Navigation Officer Krental, a young Vrelian on his first deep space assignment. His species valued logic above all else, and what he was seeing violated every principle of structural engineering he had ever learned. Chief Engineer Sarkoth, a stocky Thurian with 6 manipulator arms, was already running diagnostics on the mysterious vessel. His species had built some of the most advanced ships in Coalition space, and his expertise in vessel construction was unmatched. What his scans revealed made his primary heart skip a beat. "Captain, the hull composition contains elements I cannot identify. There are alloys present that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of materials science. The structural integrity fields are still active despite what appears to be catastrophic system failure. Whoever built this understood physics in ways we do not." Vexlar processed this information carefully. In his 40 years of service he had encountered many mysteries in deep space, but nothing quite like this. "Any identification markers? Can we determine its origin?" Thelmos worked her console with renewed focus. "There are markings on the hull, but the language is completely unknown. Wait, I'm detecting faint power signatures. The ship isn't dead, Captain. Something inside is still functioning." Medical Officer Drenka, a compassionate Peltharian whose species had elevated healing to an art form, leaned forward from her station. "Captain, I'm picking up biological signatures. There are life forms aboard that vessel." The revelation sent a wave of shock through the bridge crew. A derelict ship was one thing, but a vessel with living occupants changed everything. Coalition law required them to render aid to any beings in distress, regardless of species or origin. "How many?" Vexlar asked, his voice steady despite the racing of his hearts. Drenka's tendrils quivered as she interpreted the scan data. "Thousands, Captain. I'm reading approximately 4,000 individual life signs. But there's something strange. They appear to be in some form of suspended animation. Their metabolic rates are reduced to barely 1% of normal function. Can you identify the species?" The medical officer's silence spoke volumes before her words did. "No, sir. The biological markers don't match anything in our database. Their physiology is unlike anything I've encountered. High muscle density, redundant organ systems, and a skeletal structure that seems designed for extreme stress tolerance. Vexlar stood and approached the view screen, staring at the wounded Titan floating before them. Every instinct told him they were standing at the precipice of something momentous. Tactical Officer Gendar, status of the vessel's weapons systems? Gendar, a battle-scarred Corvian veteran, had been quietly analyzing the ship's offensive capabilities. His assessment was troubling. Captain, even in its damaged state, that ship carries enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. I'm detecting weapons systems of at least 7 different types, none of which match known technology. Several appear to still have power. Are we in danger? Unknown, sir. The weapons are not charging or tracking us, but I recommend we maintain our current distance until we know more. Vexlar nodded his agreement. Thelmos, can you access their computer systems? I want to know who they are and what happened to them. The sensor operator's crystalline skin flickered with determination as she configured her systems for an intrusion attempt. Coalition protocols strictly forbade unauthorized access to foreign computer systems, but the circumstances demanded they learn more before deciding their next action. Attempting to establish a data link now, Captain. Their security systems are sophisticated, but they appear to be running on emergency power only. I should be able to bypass the outer firewalls. Minutes stretched into an hour as Thelmos worked. The bridge crew watched in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the mystery before them. Finally, her skin flashed brilliant blue, the Zenthari equivalent of a triumphant smile. I'm in, Captain. Downloading their database now. Translation protocols are engaging, but this may take time. Their language structure is highly complex. The data began flowing across multiple screens throughout the bridge. Star charts showing regions of space the Coalition had never explored. Technical specifications for systems that seemed to violate known physical laws. And then, buried deep within the files, a single word appeared that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. Human. Vexlar repeated the word slowly, tasting its strange syllables. What does it mean? Thelmos worked frantically, her translation algorithms struggling with the nuances of the alien language. It's what they call themselves, Captain. This is a human warship. The name is Indomitable. Indomitable, the captain said softly. A peculiar name for a vessel. Perhaps not, sir, interjected Science Officer Mixtar, an elderly Qualthian whose species dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge. He had been quietly analyzing the cultural database. According to their linguistic records, the word means impossible to defeat or subdue. It suggests a philosophy of unwavering determination. Gendar's tactical display suddenly came alive with data. Captain, I've accessed their combat logs. There's video footage of their last engagement. He hesitated before continuing. Sir, I think you need to see this. Vexlar returned to his command chair. Put it on screen. The view screen shifted, and what they witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The footage showed a battle of such savage intensity that several crew members had to look away. The Indomitable faced an enemy fleet of 20 vessels, each comparable in size to Coalition cruisers. The human ship was already heavily damaged when the recording began, trailing atmosphere and debris. But the humans didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They fought with a ferocity that defied comprehension. The Indomitable charged directly into the enemy formation, its weapons blazing with devastating effect. Energy beams lanced out, turning enemy ships into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Missiles streaked through space, each finding its target with lethal precision. The enemy fleet responded with overwhelming firepower. The Indomitable took hit after hit, each impact tearing away more of its hull. Entire sections exploded outward into space. The ship should have broken apart, should have become nothing more than drifting wreckage. But somehow, impossibly, it held together. Pause the footage, Vexlar commanded, his voice tight with emotion. The image froze on a scene of devastation. Through a massive breach in the Indomitable's hull, they could see into the interior corridors. What they saw there defied all logic and reason. Human soldiers, clearly visible in their armored suits, were fighting inside the breached sections. They weren't evacuating. They weren't fleeing to safety. They were using the breach itself as a defensive position, firing weapons at enemy boarding craft attempting to exploit the opening. They're fighting in vacuum, Drenka whispered, her voice filled with horror and awe. That section has no atmosphere, no pressure, and they're still fighting. Sarkoth pulled up engineering data from that section of the ship. The temperature in that compartment would be fluctuating between -200 degrees and +300 depending on sun exposure. The radiation levels alone should be lethal. Resume playback, Vexlar ordered, though part of him wanted to look away. The battle continued for another 3 hours of footage. 3 hours of relentless combat where the humans refused to yield despite impossible odds. They watched as the Indomitable's crew performed acts of courage that bordered on insanity. Engineers remained at their posts even as their stations exploded around them. Medical teams operated in corridors exposed to space, treating wounded while wearing emergency suits. Weapons crews continued firing even after taking casualties that should have incapacitated them. And then they saw something that would fundamentally alter their understanding of warfare and determination. A human soldier took a direct hit from an energy weapon that punched through their armor and chest cavity. They should have died instantly. Instead, the footage showed the soldier continuing to fight for another 40 seconds before finally collapsing. Medical analysis on that soldier, Vexlar demanded. Drenka's tendrils trembled as she reviewed the data. Captain, that wound was absolutely fatal. The soldier's heart was destroyed along with both lungs. They should have lost consciousness within 3 seconds. But they kept fighting. How? I don't know, sir. Their physiology shouldn't allow it. Unless. She paused, running additional scans. Captain, I'm detecting extremely high levels of chemicals in their bloodstream. Adrenaline at concentrations that would be toxic to most species. Their entire endocrine system appears designed to push their bodies far beyond normal operational limits during stress. Mixtar had been cross-referencing the combat data with the ship's logs. Captain, I found something disturbing. According to the medical records, every human aboard this ship was wounded during that battle. 78% suffered injuries classified as fatal by their own medical standards. Fatal? Krental questioned. But they survived. We're detecting life signs. No, Drenka corrected, her voice hollow. According to these records, they died. Clinical death confirmed by their automated medical systems. And then they were revived. Multiple times in some cases. There's a soldier named Marcus Chin who died 3 times during that single engagement. Each time, their medical team brought him back and sent him back into combat. The bridge fell into stunned silence. The implications of what they were learning were staggering. This wasn't just advanced medical technology. This was a fundamental refusal to accept death itself as a limitation. Why? Vexlar asked, though he wasn't sure anyone could answer. Why would they do this to themselves? Thelmos had been digging deeper into the ship's database. Captain, I found their mission parameters. They were defending a colony world called New Providence. Population 75,000, all civilians. The enemy fleet was attempting orbital bombardment. Did the colony survive? A long pause before Thelmos answered. Yes, sir. The Indomitable held the line for 19 hours until reinforcements arrived. The colony suffered less than 100 casualties. Jandar pulled up tactical maps of the engagement. Captain, look at this. The Indomitable positioned itself directly between the enemy fleet and the planet. They used their own hull as a shield. Every shot the enemy took at the colony had to go through them first. Understanding dawned on Vexlar like a cold wave. They sacrificed themselves. Deliberately. Not just sacrificed, Mixtar corrected gently. They refused to abandon their duty even when death was certain. This wasn't a tactical calculation. This was a choice based on values we need to understand. Sarkoth had been analyzing the ship's final moments. Captain, after the battle, the Indomitable's power core was failing. The crew had enough energy to either maintain life support or engage the stasis systems for everyone aboard. According to the logs, the captain ordered everyone into stasis and diverted all remaining power to keeping them alive. They've been drifting in suspended animation for 73 years, waiting for rescue that might never come. Vexlar looked at the damaged warship floating before them with new eyes. This wasn't just a vessel. It was a tomb, a monument, and a message all at once. The humans aboard had fought beyond endurance, died and been resurrected, and finally committed themselves to frozen sleep rather than abandon hope. Drenka, he said quietly, can we revive them? The medical officer studied her scans carefully. The stasis systems are sophisticated, more advanced than our own. Yes, I believe we can safely initiate revival protocols. But Captain, we don't know anything about their psychology, their culture, their intentions. What if they're hostile? Vexlar stood and approached the view screen one more time, placing a hand against the cold surface as if he could reach across the void and touch the sleeping warriors beyond. They fought for 19 hours to protect civilians they were sworn to defend. They died repeatedly rather than abandon their post. They chose to sleep for decades rather than give up hope of returning home. Does that sound hostile to you? He turned to face his crew, seeing the mix of fear and wonder in their eyes. We're going to wake them up. We're going to bring the Indomitable's crew home. And perhaps, if we're fortunate, we'll learn what it truly means to be indomitable. As his crew began preparations for the most important first contact in Coalition history, Vexlar couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far more significant than a derelict warship. They had found evidence of a species that viewed the impossible as merely difficult, that treated death as an inconvenience rather than an ending. Whatever these humans were, whatever drove them to such extremes of courage and determination, the galaxy was about to change forever. And Vexlar suspected that the Coalition, comfortable in its peaceful ways, was about to receive a profound education in what it meant to truly fight for what mattered. The Quantum Dawn moved closer to the Indomitable, preparing to make contact with warriors who had slept for 7 decades, dreaming perhaps of home, of the people they had saved, of battles won and comrades lost. Soon those warriors would wake. And then the real questions would begin. When warriors rise from sleep. The preparation took 6 hours. Medical Officer Drenka worked tirelessly with her team, studying the human stasis systems with the intensity of someone who understood that mistakes could cost lives. The technology was elegant in its complexity, far more sophisticated than anything the Coalition had developed. Every cell in the sleeping humans' bodies was maintained in perfect suspension, their biological processes slowed to such a degree that aging had essentially stopped. Captain Vexlar stood in the Quantum Dawn's medical bay, watching through the observation window as the first stasis pod was carefully transported from the Indomitable. His crew had managed to establish a secure umbilical connection between the two ships, allowing them to move the pods without exposing them to the vacuum of space. The pod itself was massive, built to accommodate a human in full combat armor, and covered in text that the translation systems were still struggling to decode. "This is the one," Drenka announced, her tendrils gesturing toward the pod as it was secured to the medical platform. According to the ship's database, this contains Captain Sarah Chin, commanding officer of the Indomitable. If we're going to wake anyone first, it should be her. Through the transparent surface of the pod, they could see the human inside. Captain Chin appeared to be female by human standards, her features peaceful in sleep. She wore a dark blue uniform with insignia that presumably denoted her rank. Even unconscious and frozen in time, there was something about her expression that suggested strength and determination. "Begin revival sequence," Vexlar ordered, his voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through his system. Drenka initiated the protocols they had painstakingly extracted from the Indomitable's medical database. The stasis pod hummed to life, its systems responding to the commands. Readouts began scrolling across monitors as the human's metabolic processes slowly increased. Heart rate climbing from 2 beats per minute to 10, then 20, then faster. Brain activity spiking as neural pathways reactivated after 73 years of dormancy. Body temperature rising, one of Drenka's assistants reported. Cellular regeneration proceeding normally. All vitals are entering acceptable ranges. The process took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Every member of the medical team watched with held breath as the first human in over 7 decades began the journey back to consciousness. Finally, the pod seals hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor into the medical bay. Captain Chen's eyes opened. They were brown, Vexlar noted, and filled with immediate alertness that suggested a mind trained for crisis response. She didn't panic or thrash. Instead, her gaze moved systematically around the room, taking in every detail, assessing her situation with the calm efficiency of a trained military officer. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse from disuse but steady. The translation system rendered her words into Coalition standard after a brief delay. Vexlar stepped forward slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening. "Captain Chin, I am Captain Vexlar of the Coalition research vessel Quantum Dawn. You're safe. We found your ship drifting and revived you from stasis. You have been asleep for 73 years. He watched her process this information. A flicker of emotion crossed her face, too quick to identify before the professional mask returned. "My crew. All alive and in stasis. We wanted to revive you first to discuss the situation." Chin sat up slowly, testing her body's responses. Drenka moved forward with a medical scanner, but the human captain waved her away politely. "I'm fine. The stasis systems on the Indomitable are reliable." She paused, a shadow crossing her features. 73 years. The colony? "We have no information about New Providence," Vexlar admitted. We only recently arrived in this sector of space. Your ship's logs showed that the colony survived the battle. Something in Chen's posture relaxed slightly at this news. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if confirming they still worked. You've reviewed our logs then. You know what happened. We saw the battle, Vexlar confirmed. What you and your crew accomplished was remarkable. Chen's laugh was bitter and sharp. Remarkable. That's one word for it. She stood, and several of the medical staff took an involuntary step back. The human was smaller than Vexlar, barely reaching his shoulder, but there was something in the way she moved that suggested coiled danger. How much did you see? Did you see Private Martinez hold a breach point for 6 hours with a broken spine? Did you see Engineer Torres keep the reactor stable while bleeding out from a severed artery? Did you see what it cost us? The medical bay fell silent. Vexlar chose his words carefully. We saw people refuse to surrender when any rational species would have withdrawn. We saw soldiers continue fighting after sustaining wounds that should have killed them. We saw a crew that chose duty over survival. Chen's eyes locked onto his, and in their depths, he saw something that made him understand why the other species in the galaxy might fear humans. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was absolute, unshakable conviction. You don't understand, she said quietly. Those weren't soldiers. They were people. Martinez was studying to be a teacher before he enlisted. Torres had a wife and 2 children waiting for him at home. Every single person on my ship had a life, had dreams, had people who loved them. And they all knew that if we failed, 75,000 civilians would die. So we didn't fail. Even at the cost of your own lives? Especially at that cost. Chen moved to the observation window, looking out at the Indomitable floating in the distance. That's what you don't understand about humanity, Captain. We're not special. We're not particularly strong or fast or smart. But we have one advantage that trumps everything else. What is that? We're stubborn. She turned back to face him, and for the first time, a slight smile touched her lips. When we decide something matters, when we commit to protecting something or someone, we don't know how to quit. Our bodies might fail, our equipment might break, every logical calculation might say it's impossible. We fight anyway because the alternative is unacceptable. Science Officer Mixtar, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward. Captain Chin, we've studied your cultural database. Your species has a remarkable history of perseverance against impossible odds. But what we witnessed on the Indomitable goes beyond that. You died. Multiple members of your crew experienced clinical death and were revived. That level of medical intervention suggests a society willing to violate what many species consider natural law. Chen's expression hardened. Natural law? Let me tell you about natural law, Science Officer. Natural law says the strong prey on the weak. Natural law says that might makes right. Natural law says that when the odds are against you, you should surrender and hope for mercy. She paused, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Humanity rejected natural law the day we invented the spear. We've been telling the universe, no, ever since. Drenka moved closer, her medical curiosity overcoming her caution. The revival technology aboard your ship is extraordinary. The ability to reverse clinical death opens possibilities we've never considered. But the psychological trauma of experiencing death and resurrection must be severe. It is, Chin acknowledged. Every person we brought back was offered the choice to remain in medical bay. Every single one chose to return to duty. Not because we forced them, but because they understood what was at stake. Vexlar felt he was beginning to understand something fundamental about these humans. You mentioned that your crew were ordinary people. Teachers, engineers, parents. They weren't career warriors. No, Chin confirmed. We have career soldiers, but the Indomitable was a garrison ship. Most of our crew were reservists, people who served part-time while maintaining civilian careers. When the war started, they left their families and their lives because their planet needed them. And after 73 years, those families are gone, Vexlar said gently. Everyone they knew has aged or passed away. They'll be waking to a world that has moved on without them. For the first time, Chen's professional composure cracked. Pain flashed across her features, raw and honest. I know. Believe me, Captain, I've had 20 minutes of consciousness to think about that. My daughter would be 93 years old now if she's still alive. My husband passed away decades ago. The world we fought to protect has forgotten us. Drenka moved closer, her medical curiosity overcoming her caution. The revival technology aboard your ship is extraordinary. The ability to reverse clinical death opens possibilities we've never considered. But the psychological trauma of experiencing death and resurrection must be severe. It is, Chin acknowledged. Every person we brought back was offered the choice to remain in medical bay. Every single one chose to return to duty. Not because we forced them but because they understood what was at stake. Vexlar felt he was beginning to understand something fundamental about these humans. You mentioned that your crew were ordinary people. Teachers, engineers, parents. They weren't career warriors. No, Chin confirmed. We have career soldiers, but the Indomitable was a garrison ship. Most of our crew were reservists, people who served part-time while maintaining civilian careers. When the war started, they left their families and their lives because their planet needed them. And after 73 years, those families are gone, Vexlar said gently. Everyone they knew has aged or passed away. They'll be waking to a world that has moved on without them. For the first time, Chen's professional composure cracked. Pain flashed across her features, raw and honest. I know. Believe me, Captain, I've had 20 minutes of consciousness to think about that. My daughter would be 93 years old now if she's still alive. My husband passed away decades ago. The world we fought to protect has forgotten us. Then why wake your crew? Vexlar asked. We could arrange transport for the Indomitable to human space, deliver everyone still asleep to their families, spare them the knowledge of what they've lost. Chen's response was immediate and fierce. Because they deserve to make that choice themselves. They earn the right to face whatever comes next with their eyes open. We don't abandon our people, Captain. Not in combat, not in death, and certainly not in sleep. A communication chime interrupted the conversation. Tactical Officer Gendar's voice came through the speakers with unusual urgency. Captain Vexlar, we're detecting multiple vessels approaching our position. Configuration matches the enemy fleet from the Indomitable's battle logs. The word sent a chill through everyone in the medical bay. Vexlar activated his communicator. How many ships? 15, sir. They'll be within weapons range in 20 minutes. Chin moved before anyone could react, crossing to the nearest terminal and pulling up the sensor data. Her fingers danced across the unfamiliar controls with surprising competence, and the translation systems managed to keep up. Her face went pale as she studied the readings. Krathok raiders, she said, her voice flat. They're scavengers who prey on wounded ships and vulnerable colonies. They must have been tracking the Indomitable's distress beacon for decades, waiting for someone to show up and power it on. Can we outrun them? Vexlar asked. Chin shook her head. Not with the Indomitable in tow. Your ship is fast but not built for combat. You'd have to abandon my vessel and crew to escape. The implication hung in the air. Vexlar felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. The Coalition was a peaceful organization. The Quantum Dawn had defensive shields and minimal weapons, nothing that could stand against 15 raiders. The logical choice was clear. Abandon the human ship, escape with Captain Chin, and report the situation to Coalition military forces. It would take weeks for help to arrive, but at least his crew would survive. He looked at Chin and saw her watching him with those intense brown eyes. She knew what he was thinking. She knew the logical choice. And he could see that she expected him to make it, to choose survival over duty just as any rational being would. That's when Vexlar understood the test that fate had placed before him. The humans aboard the Indomitable had faced this exact choice 73 years ago. Abandon their duty and live, or stand and fight against impossible odds. They had chosen to fight, to die repeatedly if necessary, because the alternative meant betraying everything they stood for. No, he said quietly. We don't abandon people who need our help. That's not who the Coalition is, and it's not who I am. Chen's expression shifted, surprise and respect mingling in her features. Captain, you can't fight 15 raiders with a research vessel. You'll die. Perhaps, Vexlar acknowledged. But we won't die alone. How many of your crew can be revived and combat ready in 20 minutes? A fierce smile spread across Chen's face, transforming her from a tired officer into something that reminded Vexlar of the predators from his homeworld. Give me 15 minutes and I'll have 50 warriors ready to turn your ship into a fortress. But I need access to the Indomitable's armory. Vexlar activated his communicator. Sarkoth, establish a priority transfer corridor between ships. Medical team, begin revival protocols on 50 humans. Combat personnel first. Drenka stepped forward, her tendrils quivering with concern. Captain, reviving that many people simultaneously is dangerous. The medical systems weren't designed for mass revival. Then adapt them, Vexlar ordered. We have 15 minutes to prepare for a battle we probably can't win. I suggest we make them count. The medical bay exploded into organized chaos. Additional stasis pods were rushed in from the Indomitable while Drenka's team worked frantically to prepare the revival equipment. Chen stood at the center of the activity, directing operations with the calm authority of someone who had commanded in crisis before. As the first pods began their wake cycles, Vexlar returned to the bridge. His crew looked at him with expressions that mixed fear and determination. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. But they had made their choice to stand with the humans, and they would face whatever came with courage. "Status?" he asked, settling into his command chair. Gendar's claws clicked against his tactical console. 14 minutes until the raiders are in weapons range. They're not bothering to hide their approach. They think we're helpless. "Let them think that," Vexlar said. "Thelmos, can you access the Indomitable's weapons systems?" The sensor operator's skin shifted through colors as she worked. "Attempting now, Captain. Their systems are heavily damaged, but some weapons appear to still be functional. If I can reroute power from our generators to their grid, we might be able to fire 3, maybe 4 salvos before the systems overload." "Make it happen. Sarkoth, I need you to reinforce our shields with whatever you can jury-rig from the Indomitable's generators." The engineer's 6 arms moved in a blur across multiple consoles. "Already on it, Captain. Though I should mention this violates about 40 safety protocols and will probably burn out our shield emitters." Noted and accepted. Behind them, the bridge doors hissed open. Captain Chen strode onto the bridge wearing full combat armor that had been hastily retrieved from the Indomitable. The armor was scarred and battle-worn, but it had been maintained with obvious care. She carried a weapon that looked brutal in its simplicity, all function and no aesthetic consideration. 50 humans reviving now," she reported. "They'll be groggy but functional in 10 minutes. Where do you need us?" Vexlar gestured to the tactical display. "We have multiple breach points in our hull from previous research incidents. They're patched but vulnerable. If the raiders manage to penetrate our shields, they'll target those weaknesses." Chin studied the display with a professional eye. "We'll fortify each breach point. If they want to board us, they'll pay for every meter in blood." More humans began arriving on the bridge, each wearing the same scarred armor, each carrying weapons that looked designed for one purpose: efficient killing. But what struck Vexlar was their faces. These were people who had been asleep for 73 years, who had woken to find everything they knew gone, who had minutes to prepare for a battle they might not survive. And yet they moved with purpose and determination, taking positions throughout the ship as if this was just another day at work. Drenka stepped forward, her tendrils quivering with concern. "Captain, reviving that many people simultaneously is dangerous. The medical systems weren't designed for mass revival." "Then adapt them," Vexlar ordered. "We have 15 minutes to prepare for a battle we probably can't win. I suggest we make them count." The medical bay exploded into organized chaos. Additional stasis pods were rushed in from the Indomitable while Drenka's team worked frantically to prepare the revival equipment. Chen stood at the center of the activity, directing operations with the calm authority of someone who had commanded in crisis before. As the first pods began their wake cycles, Vexlar returned to the bridge. His crew looked at him with expressions that mixed fear and determination. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. But they had made their choice to stand with the humans, and they would face whatever came with courage. "Status?" he asked, settling into his command chair. Gendar's claws clicked against his tactical console. 14 minutes until the raiders are in weapons range. They're not bothering to hide their approach. They think we're helpless. "Let them think that," Vexlar said. "Thelmos, can you access the Indomitable's weapons systems?" The sensor operator's skin shifted through colors as she worked. "Attempting now, Captain. Their systems are heavily damaged, but some weapons appear to still be functional. If I can reroute power from our generators to their grid, we might be able to fire 3, maybe 4 salvos before the systems overload." "Make it happen. Sarkoth, I need you to reinforce our shields with whatever you can jury-rig from the Indomitable's generators." The engineer's 6 arms moved in a blur across multiple consoles. "Already on it, Captain. Though I should mention this violates about 40 safety protocols and will probably burn out our shield emitters." Noted and accepted. Behind them, the bridge doors hissed open. Captain Chen strode onto the bridge wearing full combat armor that had been hastily retrieved from the Indomitable. The armor was scarred and battle-worn, but it had been maintained with obvious care. She carried a weapon that looked brutal in its simplicity, all function and no aesthetic consideration. 50 humans reviving now, she reported. They'll be groggy but functional in 10 minutes. Where do you need us? Vexlar gestured to the tactical display. We have multiple breach points in our hull from previous research incidents. They're patched but vulnerable. If the raiders manage to penetrate our shields, they'll target those weaknesses. Chin studied the display with a professional eye. We'll fortify each breach point. If they want to board us, they'll pay for every meter in blood. More humans began arriving on the bridge, each wearing the same scarred armor, each carrying weapons that looked designed for one purpose: efficient killing. But what struck Vexlar was their faces. These were people who had been asleep for 73 years, who had woken to find everything they knew gone, who had minutes to prepare for a battle they might not survive. And yet they moved with purpose and determination, taking positions throughout the ship as if this was just another day at work. One human, a tall man with gray-flecked hair, approached Chin and saluted. "Captain, Sergeant Davis reporting. All breach points are being fortified. We've placed charges at critical junctions in case they try to take engineering." "Good work, Sergeant." "Weapons distribution?" "Everyone's armed with what we could pull from the Indomitable's armory. It's not much, but it'll do." Chin turned to Vexlar. "Captain, with your permission, I'd like to take tactical command of the defense. Your crew can focus on keeping us alive and mobile while my people handle the fighting." It was a reasonable request, and Vexlar knew his crew lacked combat experience. "Granted. Jindar, coordinate with Captain Chin. Give her whatever support she needs." The Corvian tactical officer nodded, his respect for the human captain evident in his posture. "It would be an honor, Captain Chin." The countdown continued. 5 minutes. 3 minutes. 1 minute. "Raiders entering weapons range," Jindar announced. "They're hailing us." "Put them through," Vexlar ordered. The view screen flickered to show a Krathok commander, his reptilian features twisted in what passed for a smile among his species. "Coalition vessel, you have stumbled into a salvage claim. Surrender the derelict and we will allow you to leave." Vexlar stood, drawing himself up to his full height. "The vessel you claim is not abandoned. It carries living crew who we will not surrender." The Krathok's laugh was harsh and grating. "Then you will die with them. Your research ship cannot stand against my fleet. This is your last chance to show wisdom." Before Vexlar could respond, Chin stepped into view of the communication pickup. The Krathok commander's expression shifted immediately from amusement to shock. "Humans?" he hissed, his previous confidence evaporating. "The derelict is a human warship?" "The Indomitable," Chin confirmed, her voice cold as vacuum. "You know what that means, don't you? You know what we're capable of." The Krathok's claws scraped against his command chair's armrests. 73 years we've been waiting for someone to activate that beacon. 73 years of patience. We won't be denied our prize by corpses awakened from sleep. "Then come and try to take it," Chin said simply. "But know this. Every human aboard this ship has already died once fighting creatures like you. Death doesn't frighten us anymore. We'll drag you into hell with us if that's what it takes." The transmission cut off. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Jindar spoke, his voice carrying a note of admiration. "Captain Chin, that was either the bravest or most insane thing I've ever witnessed." Chin's smile was cold and sharp. "Among humans there's often no difference. Raiders are closing. All hands prepare for combat. Remember what we're fighting for. Every second we buy might be the second that allows reinforcements to arrive. Every raider we destroy is one less threat to innocent people. Make every shot count." Through the view screen, they watched as the 15 raider vessels spread into attack formation. Vexlar felt his heart's racing, his body's natural fear response trying to convince him to flee. But he looked at the humans stationed throughout his bridge, at Captain Chin standing tall despite everything she had lost, at his own crew who had chosen to stand rather than run, and he felt something else overcome the fear. Pride. "All weapons, fire at will," he commanded. The Indomitable's remaining weapons came online with a sound like distant thunder. Energy beams lanced across space, catching the first raider vessel and burning through its shields. The Coalition and humanity, separated by vast distances and unknown to each other until hours ago, fought together as the raiders closed in. Captain Chin moved to stand beside Vexlar's command chair. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "thank you for choosing to stand with us. You could have run." "So could you," Vexlar replied. 73 years ago, you could have abandoned New Providence and saved yourselves. But we didn't. And neither will we. Today we're all indomitable." The first raider opened fire and the battle began. 50 humans and a crew of Coalition scientists against 15 warships. The odds were impossible. The outcome uncertain. But they fought anyway because that's what you did when something mattered more than survival. And in that moment, as weapons fire lit up the void and shields flared under impact, two very different species discovered they weren't so different after all.